So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a little webinar we put together on behalf of NAPLE, the Internet Society and the Gigabit Libraries Network. We're going to talk today about public access to the internet in libraries, and particularly a new method of providing that access through low Earth orbit satellite link-ups. For your sort of information, those of you who've joined us here, you're with colleagues from NAPLE, which is the National Authorities on Public Libraries in Europe. You're with colleagues from the Irish public library sector, specifically those county librarians who are involved in our infrastructure committee. We've also got colleagues here from our Department of Rural and Community Development who deal with the Irish National Broadband Plan. And of course, we have colleagues also from DCMS, Department of Culture, Media and Sport in the UK, and brilliantly joined by colleagues from the US who are going to talk to us about what's been going on with this new opportunity for internet access. I'm going to say just a couple of words about where this sits in what you might call big international advocacy for libraries. Now, about 10 years ago, I was involved in an effort within something called the Internet Governance Forum, which is the UN's sort of body for discussion of internet issues, also known as the IGF, to get libraries more recognized in debates about the future of the internet. And we set up within the IGF what some of us may have called sort of a working group, but the IGF calls a dynamic coalition, which sounds extremely grand. But we set up a dynamic coalition on public access in libraries. And that's now been running for, probably about nearly 10 years. And during that time, we've consistently pushed the message to all UN member states that public access to the internet is an essential part of the internet ecosystem, and that we cannot rely on the idea that everybody will have their own laptop, phone, tablet, their own home connection to the internet. Public access will have a strong role to play in connecting the unconnected, of which there are still huge numbers around the world. So that was our first sort of message. But our other message really was that the wheel did not need to be reinvented on this. We've got something like 400,000 public libraries around the world. They exist, they're funded, they're part of community networks, and they should be utilized to deliver that public access. And I would say that over the years that we've been pushing this, and those are years during which I've met Don, who's here today from the Gigabit Libraries Network, we've had quite a lot of success in raising the profile of the issue. And have begun to form a lot more partnerships with bodies like the Internet Society, amongst others. So the purpose today for us here is to learn about something new. I'm going to stop sort of talking, and we're going to learn from Don and colleagues about Starlink, which I'm going to let Don introduce, and the potential it has for connecting public libraries in remote and rural areas. Now, those of us on the call may not have areas that are necessarily suitable for Starlink connections, but others of us will have parts of our countries, even in Europe, where we're not able to reach in with fiber or more sort of traditional means of connecting people to the internet, and Starlink may be an option for us. And we're very lucky to have two colleagues as well alongside Don on the call, Richelle and Carolyn, who are actually at this moment working with Starlink connections with their libraries in the US. And we're going to hear from them a little bit about what that actually means and entails. So Don, I'm going to hand over to you here. For those who've joined on the call, though, just that last piece of housekeeping, we're not doing a round the table introduction. If you've got a question or an intervention in the chat, it would be great to put your name and who you are and where you're from. So Don, over to you, and give us a little bit of an idea of precisely what we're talking about today.
Okay, great, Stuart. Thank you so much for this. It's been It's been fascinating to be working with you since we met at the 𝗦𝘁 conference in Lyon, now 6-7 years ago. It was not long after that, the IGF in Brazil. And this cause of public access to us is the only reasonable approach to actually, accomplishing the goal of providing an opportunity for anyone to connect. The current business models and current technologies have failed. I can't put it more bluntly than that, because there's some 3.5 billion, as you pointed out, a huge number of people around the world that are not served. And they're not served for the obvious reasons, business reasons, that they're too expensive to serve. They typically don't have very much money on top of that. So this is where the library comes in. It serves anyone, open to all. I'm going to go ahead and load a few slides here, I hope. So is that up?
Yep, that looks good.
Okay, so LEO libraries. This is the name we're calling this campaign, which is just starting. That's what we're doing right now, is trying to kick this off. And yet we don't exactly know what it is. We do know a few things, and one of them is that there is a new technology, the low Earth orbit satellites. It's new. It's in its early stage. It's only being offered by one company, Starlink, as Stuart mentioned. It's been talked about, dreamed of, and even attempted for at least the last 20 years, but no one's been able to do it until now. And SpaceX, which is the rocket company of Elon Musk, is launching these satellites. And what we're looking at here, this image in the middle, is a rack of these satellites. It's some 60 satellites on a rack that are launched at one time towards their goal of thousands of these things. Currently, they have just shy of 2,000, but it gives them kind of a global capability. That is to say, they can connect almost anyone, almost anywhere, though they do need permissions. They do need permissions from the national regulators, like the FCC in the US, and every country has its own regulator. And the regulators give them operating permission to use specific spectrum, typically 12 gigahertz or whatever that's worth, which is a really effective speed. The low Earth orbit satellite is new. A lot of people have been connecting by satellites that are out in remote places beyond, as Stuart mentioned, the wireline connection, or even the terrestrial wireless, which requires towers, etc. So the traditional economics, infrastructure economics, says the farther you are away from the core, the more expensive it is to deliver services. Okay, in this case, the cost of delivery is basically up and down. So the cost to deliver connectivity in downtown Berlin is the same as it is in outer Mongolia, just up and down to the satellites. These satellites, pardon me, are approximately 500 kilometers up, which is much closer than the geostationary satellites, which are some 35,000 kilometers out, which is a long way for the signal. Even at the speed of light, it's too slow for latency issues, and there are other issues related to geostationary satellites. They don't perform that well, not compared to this service. Here's what they have to do: is the geostationary satellites are out there apparently at a stationary point as the Earth turns. They go around one time per day. And the dishes aim at one point in the sky, basically towards the equator, and have a connection. In this situation, the satellites have to be a matrix of orbits crisscrossing to create constant coverage from a very low altitude, comparatively speaking. And the way they do this, or organize it, is through these cells. So as the satellites cross, they create a hexagonal cell, and these are how Starlink decides if it can add more end users in those cells because they have capacity, they have limits in how much the frequency and the current constellation at, like I say, less than 2,000 can accommodate. So they're doing it stage by stage, country by country. They get permission. They start responding to requests for dishes. I'll show you one in a minute. And then they manage those to not overload a particular cell. That's one of their concerns about libraries, is that as an aggregated user site, would that heavily impact the performance of a cell? Well, it's a good question. That's one of the things we want to find out. So they're the only one to date. They report over 100,000 beta users. This is a residential service as they have rolled it out, and they claim to have another 500,000 orders. So this is extremely popular for a lot of people. Many people still haven't even heard of it. Well, understandable. This is the retail residential price of $100 US per month, and you have to buy the dish. It's yours, but you can only use it in the location where you've been licensed to use it. You can't move around with it. I'll show you what it looks like in a second. There's one caveat on this, is that currently the locations have to be within 500 kilometers of a ground station. So the signal goes up and it comes down, and of course it has to get into the global fiber network somewhere. And currently these ground stations are the way that happens. Currently, actually the last batch of satellites that Starlink just launched a couple of weeks ago have the capacity to communicate by laser satellite to satellite. So this precludes the need to have these ground stations, which are not simple, of course. You have to have fiber, and that's not everywhere. We had just explored possible new beta sites in Nigeria, and they all had to be within 500 kilometers of Lagos. They don't yet have a regulator permission to operate in Nigeria, but they're gaining that. They're gaining them quite often. The speeds are impressive. This is what we would consider strong, robust broadband in the US. Not that we're the leader in quality and performance, but that's a good speed especially for places that are not connected. Currently, they're approved in some 14 countries. They're listed there, and then they're constantly applying for more. Not only is the technology of this extremely complex, but the regulatory side of it, the permissions, the dealing with the regulators is also very complex. They have to do it in every single country. So it's quite a hurdle. This is what they look like. That's what comes in a kit in the upper left corner there. That's the whole thing. It's a stand, a cable, a 100-foot Ethernet cable, and the little box at the top is an actual Wi-Fi router. The lower right, that's what an Earth station looks like. And then you can see a couple of installations there, and you can get the scale and the size of it. It's about 1 meter across. They call it 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 McFlatface, if you can believe that. They took it. I won't go into that story. I'll introduce our actual library users here. Torreon Community Navajo Tribal Library, which is not far where I am in northern New Mexico, camping out. So you'll forgive the parka and the hat. It's chilly up here. But this is Richelle's first report. These are new. These are the first 2 what we call LEO libraries in the world. These are the first libraries ever to have this kind of a connection, which we think is pretty cool. We don't really know where this is all going. Is it going to actually work? Is it going to turn into Skynet? You know, is Terminator going to pop up with this? We don't know. There are objections from the astronomers that these satellites are interfering with observations. Legitimate. They're trying to make them less reflective. The thing is, it's happening. And so we want libraries to be there at the front line to monitor it, to test it, and report on it, in addition to using it, leveraging it to provide services. Here's our other speaker, a quote. They're kind of hamming it up here when their dish arrived. And what you can see is, you know, looks like a large pizza box. And that's about it. They installed it on their roof, and they're getting great performance. Carolyn and Richelle are with us today. So just to wrap up here, we've negotiated an agreement with SpaceX's subsidiary, Starlink, for beta enterprise licenses. So these have all been beta residential licenses, and it's not yet commercially available even in the US. What they're doing is they're selling them to people who agree to the best effort kind of beta level service. They say they're going to go commercial this month in first places, but they have not announced enterprise. Enterprise being anything like a company or a library or something. So that's what we've managed to negotiate with them to. We've tried to convince them that this is in their interest, because it's great, Elon, that you can connect anyone anywhere. But what about the people that can't afford $100 a month? Okay. Well, the answer would be at least they can go to the library. Yeah, that's right. They can. I mean, it's classic library model. So this will be part of a wider study that I just mentioned. And what we're hoping today, and as we go forward talking to libraries and organizations, so forth, is to join and help to kind of build this plan. We don't own any of this. We're not agents of Starlink. We just think this is really interesting technology. We've been working with wireless for at least 15 years and how libraries can leverage new wireless technologies. And knowledge of wireless technology is extremely valuable today, and it's going to get more so, whether you're delivering it, providing it, or just buying it. You need to be more knowledgeable about wireless capabilities. And so that's what we hope that people on the call will either want to perhaps acquire one of these systems to check it out, in which case we'll connect you directly with Starlink, because they have to verify that you're in one of those cells that are currently being served. They just announced like yesterday that all of Germany is now covered. So if we have any German librarians on there, and it's not just the library. Our last two licenses are for the State Library of Utah, which are planning to use these to outfit remote outlets, like a kiosk, rather than the library facilities themselves, which are all well wired in Utah. But our advocacy has been libraries need the very, very valuable access to public information, public services that libraries provide should be convenient, more convenient to everybody. It should be actually walking distance from everybody. And so spreading out these, what we would call neighborhood library access stations, if you'll allow that, is an advocacy part of this. So connectivity is essential, as Stuart pointed out, yet it's insufficient. But it is essential. So it's a platform to build on. The related services, the training, the support, the devices, the environment, all of that is what libraries do, which makes it such an ideal partner for this connectivity that hasn't yet existed and could actually do what we've been talking about for a long time now, Stuart, and that's what got us kind of excited. I may have run over, as I usually do, so please forgive me.
Don, that's absolutely fine. And I think that was a really decent introduction to what we're talking about here. So before we do go into sort of Q&A and some discussion, I think it's going to be really useful to hear from our colleagues who are presently using the technology. And I did share some short biographies of our speakers in the agenda that I sent around yesterday. So look, I'm going to go straight ahead, and Richelle, it's an honor to have you joining us there from Torreon Community Tribal Library in New Mexico. So look, over to you, the floor's yours. Just be really interesting for the group to hear how it's been for you to work with this new technology, and congratulations to yourself and Carolyn for being the first.
Great, thank you so much. And as Stuart had mentioned, I am in New Mexico, USA. So I'm going to say good morning because it's morning time here. And as my bio gave you information, I am a elected official from my home community that has taken on one of the responsibilities, which is being a director for the library. We are currently working on establishing a position for our library for someone to be in there full time. But When I first started this position, there were other individuals that worked towards establishing the library in our community. And they are the ones that actually got me in contact with Dawn and a lot of other amazing people that brought this, I don't even know what to call it. It's an essential tool that we need every single day in our lives. And in my community, we don't have internet that comes from a local phone company or anything like that. If we do, it's only wired to our local school, to our local clinic, to the local convenience store, the one convenience store we have in our community. And when this came about, they told me about what it could do, and they wanted to know if we want to try it. And you know, who am I to say no to something like this for the community that I just got elected by? And our community consists of about 2,500 people, and a lot of our community members are students. And as everyone has probably experienced with this COVID-19 pandemic, our schools shut down. And a lot of our college students travel to a nearby university, which is about an hour and a half from our community. So they came home and they needed a way to connect to their professors, to their instructors, and not only college students, but the elementary, middle school, and high schools all shut down. And so in our community, we have our elementary school that basically they still ran the buses through the community to hand out hard copies of schoolwork. And then we started moving, the state of New Mexico started distributing Chromebooks to the schools so that the students can still be connected to the teacher in a way. But we didn't have internet in our community. So there was no way for us to use a laptop for our teachers to communicate. And so when this happened, we started working with it. I was two other individuals, Mario Atencio and Kylo Winters. And those two are the ones that probably are on the same level as Dawn, to where, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. There's a satellite. There's all these different numbers they're talking about. And I was just over here, hey, my Netflix is going really good. So, and we brought in a few students from the college level to where they were all logged on to their, I think it's called Blackboard for university. And they were streaming their classes. And we had four of them come in, and they did that. And they were just so excited to be able to connect with their professors and to actually watch the class while they were still in our home community. And when I was in school, I had to drive the hour and a half to get to class. And so they were really happy that this technology came to the library. And it's amazing. That's all I can say. I mean, I've lived in various parts of the state of New Mexico, and there were times that my internet dropped, even though I was in a city. And here we are in my home community. Our students are utilizing it out. Some stay outside in their vehicles, and some sit outside the library, because our library is limited here on the Navajo Nation as far as how many people can be in one room because of the pandemic that we're still going through here. But I host our monthly chapter meeting in our community virtually. So we have about 10 people in the library that we sit on the internet, and we conduct our meeting for about 7 hours. And so that connectivity stays the whole entire way. And that just amazes me. But that's all I have for my experience so far.
That's great, Richelle. And I've noted a couple of questions myself, but I'm going to let the group have questions, and we'll open it up. But I think maybe we'll also hear from Carolyn first in Montana, I believe. So Carolyn, how are things up there for you? And
Okay, I'm unmuted. So I live in Conrad, Montana. It's in the middle of nowhere. We're on the prairie. And so when we were initially approached, asking if we would do this, it sounded too good to be true. And we thought it was a scam. And Don's enthusiasm frightened us because he was so excited. But finally we got it together and said, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And so the equipment came. Our city guys and our IT guy are the ones that put it up. It was simple. It was relatively simple. And when we turned it on, I thought that the IT guy was going to shoot through the roof. He was so excited. And just this morning, I did speed tests, and our download is 280.51. And our upload was 18.44. And that was going from like 12 and like 11. I mean, it's bad. And so what we've noticed is that we introduced it at city council, and then we had people come over, checked it out. We have job service that's now working out of our library 1 day a week just because of the connection. I think that as far as libraries, it's perfect. I think that libraries should be cut a really good deal though on paying for it. And I think Don should promote Richelle and I to be as in the pilot program, that we should be free indefinitely. Richelle agreed. But it's been nothing but positive. It's awesome. It's instantaneous. It's just like, you don't wait for anything. And when I started here, it was dial up, and we'd hear the dial up and it'd drop all it was awful. And so this is like magic.
I mean, to go from 12 to 280, maybe.
280.
Yeah.
And of course, no one's on it right now, because the library's not open yet. But we have cars parked around the library at night. When you drive by, you see people are using it. People that have huge amounts to download come in here because it's fast, like way fast. So
I think one
that's
of the
my comment.
That I think is interesting, Carolyn, because I think once, and Don and I have talked about this for years, but there's public internet access in libraries, and then there's fast internet access in
This
libraries.
is fast.
And what you can then do with the service offering just, massively expands. Anyway, enough talking from me. Colleagues, we've got Don, Carolyn, and Richelle with us. I just want to open the floor up. We've got the hands up on the Zoom. You've all been using it for months, and happy to take questions and discussions. So 𝗏𝗏, and if you could say who you are, introduce yourself, where you're from for everybody, that'd be great.
Hello, everybody. I'm 𝗏𝗏. I'm the Dublin City Librarian. So apologies, Don. I don't know, I'm ashamed to say, how to change the title on my Zoom account, but I feel now I need to go away and find out how to do it. So you've inspired me already. I suppose just listening to Richelle and Carolyn, and I love the word awesome, Carolyn, because I'm kind of sitting here in Dublin on a Friday afternoon, tired and looking forward to the weekend. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the capacity and the potential of this is just phenomenal. I suppose the question I have is that I live in a big urban sprawl, but we have a lot of marginalized communities, a lot of disadvantaged that we never ever get to. And I suppose the question would be, can I access something like this in an urban setting for those communities? And thanks so much, guys. Delighted to be part of the conversation. Thanks, George.
Thanks, 𝗏𝗏. Don, do you want to jump in? I guess.
Let me take a shot. Let me take a shot at that. Yes, technically you could, but this is not the stated objective of Starlink, is to compete with urban markets, which are comparatively well served. I realize that there are a lot of holes in the service. There are a lot of unserved people in the middle of urban settings. But Starlink's objective, their stated objective, is to try to serve the people farthest out. That's where they have the advantage of their system, even though it could go right into an urban area. And actually, we think they should do that to libraries that don't have high performance broadband, wherever they are. We think every library should have this, even as a backup, it'd be valuable. But sorry, probably it won't work for the time being.
Sorry about that, Mairead. We'll have to move you to the country. See what we can find. Colleagues, other questions? Don't be shy here, because we haven't talked about this technology before, and it'd be interesting if you've got questions or comments. Jenny, over to you.
Hiya, I'm Jenny. I work at the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport in the UK, and we have responsibility for public libraries in England. And I'm very much learning all about this from a very low base, but I'm very interested in kind of libraries as being able to provide the kind of digital access and support inclusion for people who would not otherwise be able to do so. So I suppose what I was interested in was some of the descriptions about people using, coming and sitting in cars around the library, and that use of it when the library is not open, and the kind of extent of the coverage. So how close do you need to be to the hub, to the receiver, in order to be able to kind of make use of it? And do you need, and kind of how do you need, to be a library member or something in order to be able to kind of access it? So kind of questions like that. And then also about the kind of, I think you mentioned kind of access stations that were kind of run out. So questions around that kind of access and extending it beyond the library wall.
Mother.
So should we go with Carolyn and Richelle? Do you want to take that about the logistics and the sort of area itself?
You have to be pretty near the library. Like, it doesn't extend to businesses around us. So pretty much like our old wireless was, except for this works. But there'll be cars in the front, cars in the back that are using it.
Richelle?
Exactly. Go ahead, Richelle.
For our area, I'm not sure if it has anything to do with how open we are, but we had I believe it's a nearby school that was wanting to know more about this, and they were talking with Starlink themselves. So they came over and they were checking how far out they have to go. So they went from our library across the parking lot, outside of the compound, down the hill a little bit. So I would say maybe 200 yards, 200 feet. I'm not sure but like I said, Kylo and Mario are the ones with all the information, but they went quite a ways from the library and he was still catching the signal on his cell phone. And he had a movie streaming while he was walking down, and it didn't stop until he got maybe at the very bottom of, because we're on top of a hill. So he got way down to the bottom of the hill where it finally cut off. So it was quite a ways for hours. But again, like Caroline had mentioned, our patrons come to the parking area, sit in their vehicles, and they get a good signal there.
And they wouldn't need to be library members, I guess, for that? Or do they log in with their library card?
No, it's open.
Okay.
It's just open to anyone. No
So that's an individual library policy, whether
we
they
don't
want it
have
open
passwords,
or
so.
you're a member or a guest, or, it's all over the place. And, I'm doing that very thing myself. And maybe I mentioned earlier, I'm at the Cuesta Public Library in northern New Mexico. It's closed. I'm sitting outside accessing their open Wi-Fi. And that's what we're talking about. The end user connects through Wi-Fi, which is traditional Wi-Fi. And there's a router that has the traditional dimensions of a hotspot, depending on walls, obstructions. If it's clear line of sight, you can go a couple hundred yards, but usually there's some kind of a wall obstruction and go, 100 feet maybe. So you can, of course, connect it to your own local network that may have multiple routers. I think in Torreon, they're using so-called TV white space, or they've set up a system which is a wide area network using a different kind of a wireless frequency. But this then becomes backhaul to whatever your network is. You can either use the existing router that comes with the dish, or you can plug it into your local network, and it's just backhaul like it was any other, like a fiber backhaul, and it just performs that way.
We plugged it in to all our public computers, and it's just working great. So.
Don, you mentioned the Utah model might be slightly different. Can you just say a couple of words about that? Because I'm very interested in that kind of off the library premises kiosk or hub and spoke thing.
Right. Us too. I mean, this just happened like at the 11th hour. These projects were funded under an IMLS, Institute for Museum and Library Services, federal libraries agency, and a grant we had for library wireless. And in the third year of that project, this became available, and we had funds left over. We were able to support now five of these projects. And the last two at the last minute on September the 30th processed, and it's the State Library of Utah. They operate all the bookmobiles in the state. I've never heard of that, but that's what they do. And they wanted to set up these remote locations. Well, as I mentioned, all of their libraries are well wired. And I've spoken with, I believe it was a library in Poland, and they said, well, all of our libraries are well wired. Okay, that's great. But that means people have to go to your library, and it may not be that convenient. And given that this technology can really go any place, the idea is to then support these stations, public access station. Think of it as some kind of a combination of a public call box and an e-government kiosk and a library Wi-Fi hotspot in a place. We think, as I say, that people should live close to that service, because it's not just the open internet we're talking about. We're talking about access to public information and public services. And this is a case we have for governments to adopt this, we think, is that governments are obligated to provide access to public information and e-gov, as it were. And yet, a lot of these services increasingly are all digital. Okay, well, who are those for? Well, they're for people that are connected. Well, what about the people that are not connected? It's one thing for Amazon to only offer services to people connected. It's a different thing for the public entity to exclude people who don't have a connection. So we feel they should assure that, and that the only answer that they have when you challenge them that way is, well, they can go to the library. Well, they don't say, share any of the savings of automation with the libraries. They just say, well, here's another job for you, library, and they take it on. But this is a way then to actually make that essential service, public information, government information services, more accessible in these stations. So the library in Utah is setting up 2 of these kiosks. I don't know what they're going to look like, but they're stations. They may be operated by the bookmobile, but they're in fixed locations on federal property. Bureau of Land Management has given them permission to set these up. What they had to go through for all that, it mind boggles me, but they were able to get permission to do it just in time. So I'm anxious to see what those look like, but that's the idea.
Okay.
The neighborhood library access stations is a term we've been using. And there are other projects we've funded with other types of wireless that are doing that. But we think it's a really strong idea that it just grows out of the original work.
It's a good one. We've got good questions now. So we're going to go with Tricia, Diego, and then Paula. So Tricia, you first, please.
Hi, Don, and thank you. This has been actually inspiring on a Friday afternoon. It's lovely. Friday morning. It has been really, really lovely to listen to these kind of exciting stories and this democratization of society through libraries. But my question is, and you touched on it, the neighborhood stations, would that technology equally work on book mobiles? So on a mobile vehicle, could you do exactly the same thing?
It's a good question. Technically, it could, but as far as I understand it, it's not yet licensed as mobile. It's licensed as fixed. Though I did read somewhere they were negotiating with the airlines to connect to the in-flight airplanes. So that's about as mobile as you can get. But the current, and they're rolling this out in stages, being very careful not to do things that will cause, degrade the service, get a bad reputation. They're just really being careful about it. So they're fixed locations. Even the bookmobile is moving. It's not providing services while it's moving, not like a school bus, as it were.
Yeah.
So point, end point. Does that answer? I hope so.
That's great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your question.
Diego, can you go next, and can you introduce yourself as well?
Yes. Hi. Thank you for this opportunity to know this project. My name is Diego Gracia. I work at the Ministry of Culture in Spain, in libraries cooperation. Okay. My question is, I don't know if I've understood correctly, I'm sorry, but I think from your presentation, Don, that Starlink is operating already in a number of countries, 10 of which are in Europe, and there's others that have requested and are waiting for the okay. So I understand from this, okay, for me to present this in my country, it would be very useful if Spain, which was not in the list you presented, have already an interest in this technology, because okay, yeah, because I suppose if not, we would need to go to this national operator and ask them to. Is there any way to know if Spain has been in contact with these people, the Starlink, and if they are willing to do so or not? Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. It's exactly on point, your question. Spain either is currently served or is imminent, is my understanding. The actual information should come directly from Starlink. If you'd like, and this goes for anybody, I can arrange for a direct session with Starlink to have these direct questions. So, and our idea, which you remind me, is to create a kind of a simple message, like a one-page description of this and the potential for it to connect so many people that are unserved, and that this document would be usable by people such as yourself who may wish to communicate with their national regulator about the condition of this, and to make the point to the regulator, yes, we think this could be really valuable to people in our library communities, and we urge you to, at least give a trial license. And we would also urge you to encourage Starlink to make a special concession or a special relationship for the public libraries, which was the point I think made earlier, that well, I think it should be free, but it's not currently because it's not a commercial service yet. So we're trying it out, and we think it'll work that way. But I'll be happy to make a direct introduction to anybody with Starlink, so they could then reveal what the actual beta license fee is, which I'm bound not to under a non-disclosure agreement. But it's just more is all I can say right now. But that's what we'd love to do is request a proposal, a global proposal. Give us an RFP. We'll generate an RFP for 10,000 or 100,000, because there are that many locations. Stuart pointed out, there are 400,000 libraries. At least 200, at least 100,000 are in extremely unserved areas. I'm just sure of that. The ratio in the U.S. is about less than half, a little less than half of rural libraries, and I haven't met very many well-served rural libraries even in the U.S. So that's the approach that I would suggest, and that's part of the wider effort, is for the national libraries or national organizations to interact with their national regulator, and any part of the government that's interested in this is an essential infrastructure element to develop this, and also make the equity argument that libraries are so good at making.
Okay. So Diego, we can definitely keep that conversation going with you and Don. And Paula, I'll come to you next.
Hi, Stuart. Just it's just been fascinating to listen to this. My name is 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 So we would have certainly some of our population right out along the Atlantic coast. They're island-based, some of them are, or they're in areas where, you know, you've got small villages fairly widely dispersed without great internet access. So, I mean, you've kind of answered my question really, in that I think that the neighborhood library access station sounds like something that might be, you know, useful in, I'm specifically thinking of some of the islands off the coast, and probably there's other counties within Ireland as well that might kind of fall under that remit. It's fantastic to hear the stories from the States and to hear what it has done for small communities. Yeah, and I think the other thing that I was wondering then was just if you had your local library access station, what kind of area are you covering, or what kind of field would you actually be putting your signal out to?
It's the same answer of a Wi-Fi hotspot. You know, a range of just say 50 meters on average, you know, more or less, depending on obstructions. And you're right, an island, perfect place. I mean, the cost of running cable to an island, impossible, especially where it's small communities. And many communities, you know, as you know, don't have a library. That's why these stations, these access stations, can be like a proto-library. They could be the point where a branch, technically in the US, a kiosk is a branch of a library system. And it's eligible under the same kind of subsidies for connectivity as other library outlets are, including bookmobiles. And the idea that it could be a place that offers service, even books, you know, a little free library. One of these places has a little free library just beside one of their remote access stations using other wireless. But that it could be a place where a librarian could show up periodically, once a week, you know, whatever you can manage, and then help people in the same way a bookmobile helps people, you know, the kind of the roving librarian model, which is really interesting to us, you know, even if there's no vehicle involved, just librarian on a bicycle.
Guys, we've got a few minutes left. Mairead, your hand's up again, so let's take what you've got.
Yeah, just a question, I suppose, for Don. We are starting to play a little bit with book lockers here in Dublin. So yes, we have 21 buildings, but there are parts of the city that we will never have a physical presence in. So we're trying to, we're piloting one and putting a book locker out into a community that isn't near a library. So, I mean, maybe that's something that could be looked at for a hotspot. These traditional kiosks, you know, these kind of large metal containers that deliver and collect materials, typically use the cell system. You know, it's like your cell phone connectivity, which is reaching out further and further and, you know, getting better. Where I am, you know, in rural northern New Mexico, the cell coverage is decent. There are big holes in it, but when you have a connection, I get, you know, 8-10 megabits, which is enough to do a lot of things. So I think you don't want to lead with the technology. You want to look at the circumstance and then design your solution, whatever is the most effective, cheapest, etc. Technology to employ. We've learned this lesson the hard way a number of times. We keep relearning it, and here we are doing it again because this is an emerging technology we think is pretty exciting and has a potential like we have not seen. This is new and this is unique. I mean, for us, we hope more come in, and you know, and it's not just Starlink. And I think there are at least a half a dozen other efforts, by the way, that are trying to do this similar thing. Governments, collaboratives with, there's an EU collaborative with, I can't remember all the participants in it, but you know, China wants to do one. So that's the other issue related to this, is the possibility for more junk in space. So these orbits and these satellites really don't want to collide with anything
bigger than a grain of sand, even that at velocity could disrupt your day. So it's a possibility. And the more people that are up there, the more likely it'll happen. But let's see what happens in the time being. So don't overinvest in any technology. If it's new, move cautiously into it, try it out, satisfy yourself it works, and then make a bigger investment. Standard procedure.
So Carolyn and Richelle, no pressure on you. You're going to work out everything for the rest of us, and we'll ask you how it goes. Yeah, that's going to be fine. James, you've got a question there in the chat. If interested, how can we progress this? And I think, building on what Don said earlier and thinking with my NAPLE hat on, I think it would be possible for us to get, literally a library's perspective one-pager together that could be used by all members to engage with their relevant government departments, so that there is the there's the outline of exactly what the project is, what benefits it is, why we think it's important, and so on and so forth, so that actually everybody's singing from the same song sheet, but you've got that information. So I think that's something that we can do. And Don, we talked about this previously. NAPLE's a good body for it, but equally colleagues from 𝗲𝘁, I don't think Stephen's on the call, but Ton from 𝗏𝑗𝐵𝑙𝑒𝑎's on the call. It's the sort of thing that we could use our networks to share with members who are interested. So I think we can do that relatively quickly, Don, I suspect.
Good. I think that would be a good move, useful document, and also could help anchor a global document. Why couldn't that same argument work anywhere? I mean, the infrastructure is going to be very different, but the idea seems to be pretty constant. So that would be a big help to do that. And also to say that, Starlink is very interested in this program. They seem to have bought into the concept that, yes, this gives them an answer to the affordability question. Yes, this gives them a way to have an installation, like a demo site, a showcase. As Carolyn was pointing out, the IT director in Conrad flipped over this, posted it on his Facebook, and had 300 people say, "I want one." So
good advertising.
Libraries have been doing this a long time. First generation broadband, a lot of people had their first experience of streaming at a library, go, that's what they've been talking about. Whatever that is, I want it at home, as opposed to bit rates and fire hoses and stuff like that. So practical experience is really valuable, especially with technology. So Starlink is interested in doing this. It should help them in their application for permission. We're going to support libraries and public access. We think that's we'd like them to make it, as I say, a global program that would give them goodwill and help their application process. So what you're talking about, Stuart, is a building block towards that, so that the advocacy is in multi-directions. So everybody's kind of advocating with everybody else. Hopefully it just doesn't hurt anybody. The national carriers, I don't think really, they've already not served all the people we're talking about. So they should not be upset about this, though many will be no matter what. Any entrant in there, no, just no. But they may not have the total power. In many places they do. They are the regulator almost. So we'll just have to work it out.
Our IT guy said that the local internet company has speeded up all their stuff, like in competition.
Well, there's competition in the market working. Yeah. Now, okay, look, at 2 minutes to 4 for us here, 2 minutes to 9 for Don and those in Mountain Time. I think that's probably about it. That's covered our time. I don't see any other hands up, but I just want to thank Don and Carolyn and Richelle for sharing all of that today. I think there's been good engagement here. I think this is such an interesting thing to learn about new text. So we've got a little bit of work to do, as we just discussed there, for next steps. We'll keep everybody on this list for this meeting as almost like a bit of a critical mass there. It's a nice starting list. Of course, if you don't want to receive the emails, you just let me know and I take you off, no problems. But basically it's the NAPLE list plus interested colleagues who've come along today. And we'll see where we get to. And we may even, maybe from NAPLE's perspective, invite Don and Carolyn and Richelle back for our annual meeting next year and see how they're getting on. Wish we could bring
invite us to Europe.
Yeah, I was just about to say it might be virtual, Carolyn.
I
Sorry.
like that.
Well, let's see. Let's see. Okay, well, you're always welcome, of course, to 𝗓𝗏 in Dublin next year. That might be a little bit more likely, but we can discuss that separately. So, all right, everyone, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, and yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Stuart. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.